welcome back to the channel, and in today's video I will be teaching what tactics are in chess and like when you will use them and why they are helpful. So if you are a beginner and you don't know what tactics are, or maybe you're more like an intermediate player but you need a quick refresher, then yeah, watch this video to find out. So tactics basically are moves that you play that either gain you material or like give you checkmate. Um, and we're gonna figure out what the best way to do that is. Um, and the first tactic we're gonna be studying today is the fork. Alright, so the fork in chess is when you move a piece so that you attack two pieces at the same time, and you're gonna win material because when one of them moves, then you take the other one. So a fork can be with, it's usually a king and some other piece, but sometimes in openings like the fried liver, if you haven't watched my video on the fried liver, go check it out. It'll be the first link in the description. So like openings like that will fork like the queen and the king, the queen and the rook in the fried liver. But some openings will fork the king and the rook or the queen and the king, stuff like that. So in this position, black's pawn is moving down, so it's about to promote. So if it were black to move, then black would just promote to a queen and then eventually win our knight by like um, making a fork again. If black were to promote, then they could go queen d4 if they were their move again, and that would be a fork, right? Because our king is attacked and our knight is attacked, and we have to move our king somewhere, like f1, and then they could take our knight. There is knight f2, so that fork wouldn't quite work, but later on they would be winning because a queen versus a minor piece is winning. Anyways, that was if it's black to move, but right now it's white to move. So can you find the only move in the position to draw for white? Alright, if you had a chance to look at that, the correct move is knight c3, which is a fork, as you can see, right? So if you had played any other move, if you had given this check, right, the king moves and now it's too slow. If the king goes like here, then you can do the fork, but let's say the king goes here, now the knight, you know, it can't go anywhere. Let's say it moves, they get a queen, and you lose, right? So knight c3 is the only check that works because you're attacking the king and you're attacking the pawn. So they don't have time to promote and get a fork. Nice little coincidence. Because they have to spend time moving the king, and when they move the king, you take this, and this is a draw because you can't checkmate with a king and a knight versus a king, basically. So that's a basic fork. Um, Another way you could have a fork is if it's not with the king, like a queen or a rook. So I'll show an example of that in a second. All right. I'll just show the fried liver because it's the most common example. So we go e4, and they go e5. This is actually in the opening, by the way. The other one was like very late on in the end game. This one's in the opening. So knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6, knight g5, and what are we threatening here, right? It's this fork. So we're threatening this f7 pawn with two of our pieces because it's only defended by the king, right? The f7 and the f2 pieces, f7 and f2 pawns are the weakest squares because they're only defended by the king, right? Everything else is defended by the queen or the bishop or, the rook. Um, so we're threatening it, and black usually plays like d5 so that we can't take here and then takes or something this. But let's say they don't. Let's say they play a random move, right? Now you can probably find the fork here, right? I just told you it's knight takes f7. And we're not attacking the king right now, but it's the queen and the rook are attacked, so the queen only has one move, or else it's gonna lose itself, which is not good. But this is still not good because we can just take the rook for free, right? And our knight can't even get trapped. Like, if it gets trapped, then they get it back because, like, if you try to trap it, then the knight just comes back here and it escapes. So, yeah. So there's two different types of forks, king and the rook, for example. Like if the knight were to somehow get over here, that would be a king and a rook fork. Um, and the queen and the rook. So king forks and non-king forks. All right, let's move on to the second tactic I have in mind, which is pins. All right, pins in chess can only happen if you have, they can only happen with a queen, a bishop, and a rook. And the reason why is because you need to be able to have a bishop that's looking at a piece, and right behind it is another piece. So let's say the bishop were on f3, and there is a queen here on d5, and a king on c6, then this is what we call a pin. Because if the queen were to move, that's illegal because then the king would be hanging, right? So the queen can't move, and we're gonna win material here because the bishop is looking at the queen, and it can't like take the bishop because it's defended, right? So if this bishop weren't defended, then it's still technically a pin, but it's not really because they can just take the bishop, and there's no point in doing that. So there's two types of pins in chess: absolute pin and relative pin. We're gonna look at both today, but first I'm gonna show you what an absolute pin is. Alright, so like I said in the example, in this position, if it's white to move, then can you find the pin here? Well, if you've had a chance to look at that, the correct answer is bishop f2 because now the queen and king don't have to be together necessarily, right? The queen is stuck on this diagonal because if it moves off, then the king will be hanging, and that's not allowed. So if the king moves, of course, we can just take the queen. Uh, if the king moves, then we can take the queen. But if the king doesn't move, let's say the queen moves somewhere, then we can also take the queen, or we don't even have to. We can just move the king, and this is still a pin, right? If the king moves, though, we have to take the queen because or else the queen's gonna get out, and then we're gonna lose. So we have to take. But if we get queen c5 or something, we don't even have to take. And if the queen takes here, it's important to have the bishop defended because then we can, whoops, if the queen takes, then we can always take back with the king. So that's what an absolute pin is, right? You have to take it. I mean, you can't move off of it or else you're gonna lose the game. Like, it's not legal to do it. You're not gonna lose the game. It's it's literally not allowed. And a relative pin is kind of the same thing, except it is allowed, but it's really not a good move. Let me show you a very classic example of this in the opening. All right, we're going back here. We're gonna go e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4. Let's go bishop c5, d3, knight f6. And right now, if you play bishop g5 here, which is one of the best moves, this is a relative pin. So if there was a king here like this is a really bad move. So the evil bar is gonna go up because why are you moving your king in the opening? Like you should be castling. Anyways, if it was like this, then the knight is literally, it's not possible to move the knight, right? Chess.com is gonna give you an error saying you can't move that. You're gonna lose your king, which is not allowed. So that would be an absolute pin. But in this case, it's a relative pin because technically you can still like move the knight. But if you do, you're gonna lose your queen for a bishop, so there's no point in doing that. If instead, let's say your queen was up here, like this, even though this is still like a pin, it's not actually like similar to a pin because they can just, they're not gonna take there because of this pawn. But they can just like move the queen knight back because when you take, it's actually just defended. It's just a queen trade. So there's no point in doing a pin with the piece that's higher or equal value to the piece you're pinning. But if you do it with the bishop like this, then they can't move the knight. Whoops. They can't move the knight because then they're gonna lose their queen. So that's what a pin is. And let's move on to the third type of tactic, which is skewer. I'm not going to take too much time on skewer because it's actually pretty similar to the pin. All I'm going to say on the skewer is that basically it's the same thing as a pin except in reverse. So let's say there was a king and a queen here and we have a king here. Yep, the evil bar is going to go down, way down. But if we put a bishop like right here, now it's going to say it's equal. And the reason is because similar to a pin, we go bishop f2 and the king has to move, it's in check, but right behind it is the queen, which is going to fall when the king moves, and this is a complete draw. So usually it's with the king, but sometimes it isn't. Let me show you an example when it isn't. Let's go back here, and then let's say king, rook, queen. We'll just put a king somewhere randomly, and then we have a bishop. In this case, this skewer wouldn't actually do anything because there's just like check, and then we can just move out of the way. But let's say there was no check. Let's say we go here. Oh wait, after this there's still a check. Oh dang. Tick tock, tick tock. I don't know. Let's do this and then put a pawn here. How about that? So after here, this is still completely losing for white because oh there's this pin. Oh my god. Yeah, we're combining pins with skewers now. This is pin, so this can't even take this. But, you know, just a general idea of a skewer where it isn't the king is that if it's something like this, then, oh, there's still a pin here. This. Oh, but it's a check. It's a check. Oh my god. So many tactics in this one example. Anyways, I'm getting distracted here. So, like, if it's a skewer like this should be losing for white if it was like black to move. No, it's equal. Oh, it's a bishop for a rook, so I guess that would be equal. But, you know, just like add a pawn here or something. And now this is completely losing for white. But if it was white to move, then, I should say from like here, then there is this skewer. And then this is gonna be winning. Uh, what is even black supposed to play here? Hold on. Queen e5. Oh, because there's a check here and then, yeah. And then the rook gets to escape. That's why it's showing up like that. But this is the entire point of the skewer. Usually it happens more in like the middle games where there's a lot more pieces. There's not gonna be just a queen, pawn, and a bishop on the board versus two pawns and a queen. So yeah. The last type of tactic I wanted to talk about today is the discovered attack. So let's get straight into that. Discovered attack, in my opinion, is the most sneaky type of tactic because it's really hard to see coming. It's really hard to like see it coming if you don't know what you're doing. So basically, a discovered attack is when you move a piece out of the way to reveal a check or an attack on a piece. But when you move that piece, it also attacks something. So let me show you what I mean. Let's set up a position where it's like queen, bishop, king. We'll put a king down, and then let's say there's a queen here. Uh, Ordinarily this would be winning. Okay, let's do this so that white's not in check. Um, Usually this would be winning for black. Let's see, black to move. Yeah, minus -12. M9. All right. But if it's white to move, then we have this clever tactic here. Whoops, let me turn off this thing. Uh, so the discovered attack, like whenever you see a queen or a rook or something lined up on the king like this, you should be thinking, ooh, wherever I move this bishop, it's gonna be a check because the queen is gonna give a check over here. So in this case, there's actually two correct answers. Pause now if you want to try to find both of them. All right, if you've had a chance to look at that, one of the correct answers is bishop c5. This is actually a double check. Another thing we should look at, where the only way you can have a double check in chess, right? Because if the queen's just like here and you give a check like this from the bishop or something, that's not possible because your queen would have been able to take the king, which is never legal. So the only way you can have a double check is if the bishop is blocking the site, and then it moves out of the way and then gives a check like this, while the queen also gives a check over here. Um, so in this case, it's a double check, but the point is that the queen is giving a check, and while black spends time dealing with that, you've already captured the queen because your bishop got over here to attack the queen. And now that I've said this, you can probably figure out what the second one is. It's going to be bishop d2, right? Because it accomplishes the exact same thing. After black moves out of the way, we can just take this queen. There is one exception, though. If the queen were able to block where the king still defends it, this wouldn't exactly work out. Let me show you what I mean by that. Alright, like in this position right here, we have the exact same discovered check, right? The queen is lined up here, and we look at this bishop and we go, ooh, look, I can put the bishop here and put the queen in check. So why isn't this winning? Why is the evil bar saying we're losing here? Well, it's because unfortunately for white in this position, black can just block the check with the queen. So they escape the check because there's a piece in the way now. But they also save the queen. So now we can trade queens or whatever, and we're going to lose this game because they have a bunch of rooks over here. So yeah, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And it's the exact same thing with bishop f3. Just queen here is going to save the day. You can look at the engine line. Yep, see, queen e6 is the only move here. If you move the queen, if you move the king anywhere, then we just take this, and then this is a draw. Queen versus two rooks is. The two rooks are usually better if there's like some other material on the board, but if it's literally just the queen versus two rooks, it's usually a draw. So, yeah. I wanted to talk about one more thing about forks. The forks I showed you, like the knight forking the king and the rook, the knight forking the king and the pawn, you know, those forks, it was only by the knight, but I just wanted to clarify that knights are the most common pieces who fork, which is why I talked about like the fried liver, which is the super common tactic idea for the knight. But knights are not the only pieces that can fork. Queens fork all the time. Pawns sometimes fork. Even rooks. Like, I know it sounds a little bit weird that like rooks can fork, but let me show you an example. Like in this position, if it was white to move, then you're like, why can the rook? Why would the rook want to fork? Okay, well that would just lose the rook. Hold on, let's go here. Like why would the rook want to fork here when it could just like take the queen? And the reason is because like if there's a bishop here, then well first of all, if you just like move your king, then you're down a queen and a bishop for a rook, which is pretty bad. So you're gonna lose. But instead, you can take this bishop, and now this is computer says it's a draw because the queen can stack itself, and then it's gonna be a draw. But like if the king moves, then you can take this, and that's how like a rook would fork. And the queen is kind of the same thing. Like for like rooks or bishops even, because like the bishop, if you want to fork like this, then you have to take a piece for it to fork. So for bishops and rooks, yes, you do have to take a first piece before you can fork it to take the second piece. But for queens, since queens are like rooks and bishops combined, if it's forking only like a rook or if it's forking only like a bishop, then yes, they would have to take a piece before it could do that because it was already attacking one of them before. Like it ever moved here, right? That's the same example we saw here. If the bishop weren't here, then you can just take the queen directly. So yeah, but the queen has a rook and bishop's ability combined, which is why it could attack one like a rook and it could attack another thing like a bishop. So, common example of this I think is like in like the Caro-Kann, um, where like your queen comes out to b6 from d8 and it attacks the b2 pawn and like the f2 pawn at the same time or something. I'm not too sure right now. Let me spend some time and see if I can find an example of the queen forking like a rook and a bishop. Alright, I think I found a variation in the Caro-Kann which works, but I'm not too sure, so let's see. Um, e4, c6, Caro-Kann, d4, d5, takes. Knight c3 is interesting. Usually people play knight f3. Knight f6, okay. Bishop e2, I mean, I guess that's fine, but like I would usually play like bishop f4 or bishop g5. But okay. Knight c6, bishop f4, yeah. a6 to prevent the knight from getting here, reasonable. Queen d2. Oh yeah, and then queen here, right? Because the knight only attacks this pawn once, and the queen defends it once. But when we go queen here, it adds another attacker, and we also attack this pawn. So this is a classic queen fork from the Caro-Kann defense. Apparently it's still equal. Apparently it's still playable. Knight f3, defending this. Sorry, d4. Wait, why can't I take that? Rook b1, queen a3, only move. Okay, apparently it's still playable because my queen is like in an awkward position here. So I'm up a pawn on this side of the board. Or actually, I've won a pawn here. Um, yeah, I think it was like this pawn here for this pawn here, but now that we've won this, we're up a pawn here. Something that. Um, yeah, apparently it's still playable for white. Maybe you guys should look into this. Um, I'll put the link in the description for this line. But yeah. That's it for today, guys. So you guys learned about forks, pins, skewers, discovered attacks, all sorts of stuff. Hopefully this will help and try to look for these kind of tactics in your games. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Hopefully this taught you something. And yeah, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Bye.